I'm Heidi Johnson, Director of Behavioral Economics at the Financial Health Network, and we're going to be talking about how employers can offer options for automatic savings to their workers during this panel. I'm very excited to be joined by Brian Gilmore, who is a director at Commonwealth, and by Naim Kabir, a software engineer and applied scientist at even. So we're going to get into talking about why automatic savings can be helpful for workers, what some of the obstacles are to providing that as an option if you're an employer, and most importantly, what each of these organizations have done to try to address some of those challenges. So as we go through and introduce each of you, I'd like to start just by reflecting on why automatic savings can be helpful, why this is something you've chosen to orient your work towards. And let's start with you, Kabir. Why is even working on automated savings? What are some of the benefits that employers should be thinking about?
Sure. I think one of the main reasons we're working on it is because we know it's a giant problem. Like, it is a now famous statistic from 2018 that 40% of Americans can't deal with an emergency $400 expense, which is a problem because I feel like life tends to throw $400 curveballs at you all the time. Not only that, but we know psychologically it's hard to save. Behavioral economics has taught us that we feel this loss aversion, like we feel losses far more acutely than we do gains, especially gains that are bound to come to you in the future. So it's not that much of a stretch to imagine on payday, when that money hits your bank account, it will be a very difficult decision to take a piece of it and put it in a savings account. It'll feel like a loss to you. So with automatic savings, where we can deduct that paycheck, we can deduct like a portion of your paycheck before it ever hits your bank account, that friction kind of goes away. You no longer have to make that hard decision each and every paycheck. You just need to make it the one time, and then it kind of frees you. There's that, and there's also the fact that the infrastructure for this already exists. We've been doing paycheck deductions for 401k for a while, and that's like a long-term saving solution. A lot of people aren't there yet. So it made sense to us to have this short-term 401k essentially, and that's what we can deliver.
I love that you brought in the behavioral perspective there, right, of what is psychologically easier for employees to engage in. And I know that's a component of Brian's work as well. With Commonwealth, you're working on auto enrollment, right? That first stage of getting started with savings. And can you tell us a little bit about, how you're taking that from the retirement space into more short-term savings and why that's important?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having us, and to FHN for putting on this panel. So I think it's helpful to think about enrollment as separate from the actual savings behavior, because enrollments are really about the process of having an account to save into and a mechanism for saving. And we know that some employees don't already have a suitable emergency savings account set up. If they do, they might not have that account information available with them already when, say, onboarding for a new job, which is often a prime opportunity to starting to save. So the idea of automatic enrollment is about making the process of having a suitable emergency savings account as easy as possible. So as you mentioned, similar to the retirement experience, not everyone is walking around with that retirement account. You don't have to choose that retirement account. The employer is setting that up for you. Why not apply that similar sort of default approach to, as an employer, choosing a high quality savings account for those short-term emergency savings needs that employees can easily use for savings. And in the retirement space, these defaults have been incredibly effective at driving participation rates. A recent study showed that having that default enrollment option for retirement savings increased participation from 44% to 86%. And that's because defaults really take out the friction of that process for an employee to choose the right account, make sure they have all the information they need, choose how much to save. I think it's still absolutely necessary that to ensure that there's choice and that employees are fully informed about the details of that default account, how it works, how they get their money out, if there's any fees or costs associated with it, and that it's really easy to opt out or adjust along the way. But simply providing that kind of default enrollment option at the outset is going to make it much easier for folks to get started.
And yeah, as you said, Brian, a lot of this work is already being done with retirement accounts, right? But it's a lot less common to see these techniques being used for short-term savings. So why is that? Why aren't all employers offering automatic enrollment for short-term savings as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Kabir mentioned the stat about, the 2018 stat of, nearly half the country not having $400 in savings for an emergency. I think, that stat and others, I think, have made folks realize how significant of a problem this is and a challenge. And I think employers are just now seeing their role in this process. So just the idea of an employer-sponsored savings account is novel to begin with. So, starting off with auto enrollment or auto savings is adding additional sort of novelty to this new concept. And retirement accounts didn't start out as auto enrollment, but kind of transitioned to that over time as we recognized the value of defaults, understood the behavioral components of, reducing friction and setting up those opportunities to make it as easy as possible. But I think at the same time, even though we're just at the outset of recognizing the role of employers in short-term emergency savings, we know what works. And I think if the sooner we can get things like automatic enrollment or at least more frictionless options for employees, I think the faster we'll get to an effective system for short-term savings inspired by the kind of long-term savings experience.
Yeah, and another piece of this that I've heard employers reflect on is the regulatory compliance component. Right? It's always a little scary to be a first mover, but especially in a space where there's some uncertainty there. And that's really important because Commonwealth has been working with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to kind of clarify some of those regulatory uncertainties. So Brian, can you just briefly tell us what that program is that you've established with the CFPB and how employers can be involved?
Yep, absolutely. In addition to the sort of novelty of this benefit overall, as you said, there are some regulatory questions or regulatory clarity that I think employers and financial service providers would benefit from. One aspect of that, as we were exploring auto enrollment, that we identified was Regulation E, which implements the Electronic Funds Transfer Act, and which the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has jurisdiction over. The CFPB also has a compliance assistance sandbox program through their Office of Innovation that really allows organizations to apply for various regulatory safe harbors. So Commonwealth applied through that Compliance Assistance Sandbox program for a template that essentially provides a blueprint and guardrails for how an employer can offer a Reg E compliant autosave program. And the way I often think about it is like a cheat sheet for employers to reference when describing how they would specifically implement their own default opt-out emergency savings program for employees, while ensuring that, again, employees understand the autosave program, that they have ample opportunity to opt out if they already have a savings account or just don't want a portion of their pay to be directed into that savings account. Really, it's about ensuring that employees have choice in the process. So we have this template that was approved. Employers would still need to apply for their specific program, but our template makes it easier, and it, again, provides those sort of guardrails or blueprints for an employer in partnership with a financial and service provider to know what kind of features or functionality that they want to consider when implementing their own autosave program.
So this is the plug to reach out to Brian if you want to learn more about that template and get engaged in that program. And Kabir, I want to bring you in to talk about the consumer perspective here of making decisions about enrolling an automatic savings program. I know Even offers an automatic savings option to employees through its platform. Can you tell us a bit about that feature and how workers access it and enroll?
Yeah, sure. So Even is a mobile application that's distributed as an employee benefit. So, you pull up your phone after you log in and authenticate with your employer and all that sort of stuff. There are a bunch of tabs in there that help you interface with your employer, your paycheck. So there's a tab that'll help you figure out how to budget and plan around your paycheck. There's a tab that tells you what paycheck is going to be, lets you take some of it early. And there's the progress tab, which is where you can decide on various savings goals that you might have and then act on them. So what you can do in this tab is you can, elect to set up a savings goal, which can be anything like, setting up a rainy day fund or saving up for something cool that you want to get, or a vacation that you deserve. You can set one of those things up, and we'll prompt you to then set aside a portion of your paycheck every pay period to go towards the savings fund. We start you off with a default of 3% of your paycheck, but you can slide it down to 1, and we currently let you go up to a max of 10%. So once you do that, and then you authorize us to do a bunch of work for you on the back end, we will spawn a savings account for you in the back end, and we'll just start doing it. We'll start taking a portion of your paycheck and putting it into this account for you. So a couple of important considerations, like we took great pains to make this as flexible a process as possible. So we have things like you can skip some of the automatic payments. You can withdraw at any time. Like there are no withdrawal limits. We're not trying to enforce that you keep savings in your savings account. It's there for you to use. You can also pause the autosave program at any time. And all those things together kind of give you agency and choice there to use it how you like. But
so you're kind of pairing this low friction to get started with control and ability to kind of configure it the way that would meet someone's financial health needs. Now, I know we work together through the Financial Health Leaders Lab, which is a program that we run to test out innovations to improve financial health. And we were focused in on how to essentially boost enrollment in this automatic savings feature, right? And so I'd love for you to talk us through kind of the process of how you updated that experience for even users and what happened.
Yeah, for sure. So in what I just described, this is just one tab out of a multi-tab app. And we kind of expected in the past for employees to meander their way towards it at some point. Like we try to get your attention and badge it and make it pop up and stuff like that to engage attention a little bit. But what we decided to do with you was actually include it in the onboarding process. So while you were signing up with your employer, after you've done everything to actually set up the fundamentals of the app itself, we would present you with a choice. Now we would say, oh, hey, by the way, we can automatically save for you. Do you want to start saving? What is your goal? What is the default percentage you want? Or do you not want to start saving right now? It was this active choice that we presented employees with. It was just one additional screen that led to a flow that was already in the app. Just one extra thing. But that one extra thing paid huge dividends. It was kind of crazy to see. But after an 8-month period, we saw a 31% boost in enrollment over the control group that we tested with, a 41% boost in savings balances. A lot of that came just because if you start early, you'll just be saving more. It's a cumulative thing. The earliest you can start, the better. But yeah, it was pretty brilliant. Just presenting them with a choice led to engagement.
Something I was really heartened about in that study as well is that we were adding onto the app onboarding process when it's always a little sensitive. You don't want to load too much in. But if I recall correctly, Kabir, you didn't see any meaningful drop off. It wasn't an obstacle to add one more step there.
There's no drop off at all because, if it was a point of friction, you could always say no. And if it wasn't, then it was something that you wanted to do, and we got you hooked up with it.
Absolutely. So, between the two of you, we've talked about a few different ways that employers can effectively offer these automatic savings options. It's clear that we can do better than just have a savings account available and hope people come to it, right? We've got these tools of active choice or of automatic enrollment. And I'd like for each of you to share, how employers should think about choosing between these various options, right? When is active choice going to be the best system for you to use? When might auto-enrollment be appropriate? So Brian, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on kind of how employers should choose between these?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think a tough one for any employer, and often in partnership with a financial service provider to decide. And, we're using words like defaults and active choice, but it's really about the experience that the user is going through. And these, as Kabir just said, these subtle changes can be really powerful. At the same time, there's regulatory considerations as well. So, from a regulatory standpoint, our autosave template addressed one, Regulation E, but there are other regulatory considerations depending on where an employer is based, state wage and payroll laws, know your customer laws. that have to be considered when designing a program. And in some cases, that active choice might be more compliant with the state wage and payroll laws than a model in which you are defaulted in and you have to take some proactive step to opt out or choose not to. So, that's one consideration, but also it's really critical to consider your employees' life situations and their experiences. I think we've emphasized on this conversation, informed choice is really critical. You can still have informed choice in an opt-out model where an employee has to actively check a box to say, no, I don't want to participate in this. But that is a bit of a higher burden on an employee and employees who are living paycheck to paycheck and just may not be comfortable with that automated enrollment. That's a consideration that you need to take as an employer. In those situations, maybe an active choice where an employee has the option to say, yes, I want to participate, or no, I don't. I mean, that's going to be more effective than the very baseline, we have an account here. If you happen to find it and want to use it, you can. I think if you are so new to this that has to be your starting point, that's okay. And we just want more employers offering emergency savings. But I think for me, thinking about active choice as even the first step is really powerful because it grabs attention of, and that's such a critical component of navigating employee benefits is to grab someone's attention. You're not forcing them to do anything, requiring them to do anything other than pay attention for a moment and decide one way or another. So given regulatory concerns and your employer's situation, first step. But even with that choice, we know that participation rates will probably be less than if you could do that true default opt-out model where an employee is checking a box to not participate.
Yeah, Kabir, anything how employers should think about choosing between auto-enrollment or active choice?
Yeah, mainly I want to double down on the importance of that informed consent. Like at the end of it all, you just want to make sure that your employees
choosing between
concerns and your employer's situation, first step. But even with that choice, we know that participation rates will probably be less than if you could do that true default opt-out model where an employee is checking a box to not participate.
Yeah, Kabir, anything how employers should think about choosing between auto-enrollment or active choice?
Yeah, mainly I want to double down on the importance of that informed consent. Like at the end of it all, you just want to make sure that your employees are not being blindsided. So if you have the communication to promulgate the idea of an autosave and you get buy-in and people are into it, then I think that would definitely be the way to go. Like an auto-enroll would definitely be the gold standard. In cases where you can't, active choice makes sense. And also it depends on content. An automatic enrollment definitely makes sense. But for example, if people turn the program off and you want them to get back on, you can't auto-enroll them back on, but you might be able to present them with a choice. And that might be a way to re-engage them.
I'm so glad we had the opportunity to kind of reveal a couple of different ways employers can start thinking about automatic savings and options for how to present that to their employees. As we close out here, I'd like for each of you to share maybe just one, that you would recommend employers take as they're starting to think about offering automatic savings and what they can do there. So Kabir, let's start with you. What's your kind of primary recommendation of a first step an employer should be thinking about taking?
First step might be talk about money at all with your employees. Like a lot of them might be reticent to talk about short-term savings and the need for it with their employer. I think with 401k, it's a little bit less of a problem because it's such a normalized standard thing. But when you have this new program, just be reluctant to talk to their employers about it. You need to really make sure that they're comfortable talking to it, and that will later let you get the consent and buy-in to offer these interesting and hopefully very helpful programs.
So start the conversation. Brian, quickly, what's your first step that you would recommend?
Similar, but I would say start the conversation with your bank partners, with your payroll providers, with the vendors you're already working with your retirement plan providers. There's new emergency savings solutions that are being designed for employers every day. And so as you start that conversation, there's going to be more high quality options for you as an employer to choose from in order to put in front of your employees.
Wonderful. Well, Brian, Kabir, thank you both so much for participating in this panel. We're going to be moving ahead to our next session on understanding the impact of workplace FinHealth programs and solutions. Leaders from Washington University in St. Louis are going to be summarizing some of the key takeaways they have from working with financial health focused fintechs. So they're going to share some early findings about what works best and for whom. We're going to start that session momentarily. Thanks so much.